Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. I'm Dr. Daniel Amen.
And I'm Tana Amen. Here we teach you how to win the fight for your brain to defeat anxiety, depression, memory loss, ADHD, and addictions.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is brought to you by Amen Clinics, where we've transformed lives for 3 decades using brain SPECT imaging to better target treatment and natural ways to heal the brain. For more information, visit amenclinics.com.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is also brought to you by BrainMD, where we produce the highest quality nutraceutical products to support the health of your brain and body. For more information, visit brainmdhealth.com. Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast.
Welcome back. We're talking about Success Starts Here, and this is actually one of my favorite sections. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Why has it been so hard for the medical community to change and come around to the imaging work we do in natural ways to heal the brain? And then I realized people hate change.
Right.
The brain hates change. That's why people get stuck in ruts and why innovation.
You don't even like when I
hard.
change a chair at home. So
I only like it if you change it to the chair I want.
yeah, but it's hard to even get that far. You like things
So we're going to talk about embracing change and new ways to do things, except the chair. And you have to know about 2 important parts of the brain. One is called the Anterior Cingulate Gyrus. It's the brain's gear shifter that sees errors. So it's involved in shifting attention, cognitive flexibility, going from idea to idea, seeing options, going with the flow, being cooperative, getting outside of yourself and into the head of your husband. It also sees errors when it works. Normally it sees errors. Like if you came home and the garage door was open, but nobody was home, No,
you think I'm like paranoid. I see errors all the time. I see them, like even tiny details, but I definitely notice when something's wrong.
When this part of the brain doesn't work hard enough, so it's runs deep, right down the middle of your frontal lobes. When it doesn't work hard enough, low motivation, low energy, low movement, and you don't talk. When it works too hard, talks a lot, dislikes change, trouble shifting attention, difficulty seeing options, hold your own opinion, don't listen to others, get locked into a course of action even though it might not be good for you. You say no without thinking first, needs to have things done a certain way, can be involved in compulsive behaviors such as washing your hands or checking locks, oppositional, argumentative, says no, upset when things don't go as you expect, can go with anxiety, people who predict the worst. I don't know anybody like this. I know a lot of people like this.
I mostly just notice things that are wrong. And I tend to say, I say no when I don't. Thing is I say no where most people will be more polite. I just say it. So I don't know what to say about that.
And then there's another part of the brain called the Basal Ganglia that integrate feeling and movement and tends to be involved with anxiety. And when these parts of the brain work too hard, people tend to be anxious, rigid, inflexible. They get stuck in a rut.
Like, have you ever known anybody that loops? I think of it as looping. Oh my gosh, they just loop and they won't let it go.
They said the same thing over and over.
And they won't let it go though until you are supposed to agree with them, even if you don't agree with them. But they won't let it go. They're going to beat it to death, right?
I had this one patient once. I said she had a PhD in grudge holding. She would not only beat things to death, she would beat them into the afterlife.
That's really hard on relationships. It's really hard on the people around you.
Oh, my God.
Right? So
yes, I've been in that sort of marriage.
Yeah, no.
I know if I die and go to hell, and the first thing I hear is a vacuum sweep, that I've gone to hell.
It won't be me.
I know that it won't be you, and I've gone to hell.
You know I have not joined you. That would not be me running the back 24/7.
Now, besides low levels of serotonin, because when serotonin levels go low, the cingulate gyrus gets more active, and then you become more rigid or inflexible. There's some psychological resistances to change. Why don't you go through those?
So you do not understand the need for change. So something might be happening and you need to change, but your brain just isn't going to accept the need to change. You're busy doing other things, completely miss that your family, health, business, and finances are headed the wrong way. So you're not picking up the cues that something needs to change.
So people didn't explain it to you. Like, we were in the store. We've sort of adopted our nieces, and I took them grocery shopping. And before we went in the store, I said, look, I just have to be like really honest with you. I don't spend my money on bad food. So I'm never going to do that. So just don't ask. And I taught them how to read food labels.
Of course, they think we're starving them to death right now, but it's okay. It's all okay.
They're doing so much better.
They're doing better.
They're doing better. But it was hard.
It was hard
for her.
We literally filled their house with food, and the first thing they said is there's nothing to eat.
What's next?
Fear of the unknown. So the brain doesn't like to do what it doesn't when it can't predict what's going to happen, right?
So many people stay longer in relationships than they should because they were afraid of what would have happened next.
I used to love what my mom used to tell me when I was a little kid, when things would not be going a certain way that I wanted them to go, and I didn't understand why. Like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Things were changing, and I didn't really like it. But my mom would tell me this one thing that was so comforting to me, and it's something I grab onto. And she'd say, sometimes God has to close all the doors around you before you will take the time to turn around and see the one that's open. And so I try to remember that when I'm starting to resist what's going on. It's like, wait a minute, is there a door that's open that I'm supposed to be seeing?
Sometimes people don't change because they have low self-confidence, low self-esteem.
Yeah.
They're afraid of conflict.
Would you say some people are afraid of success? If it's a big change?
Yes, but it's less than I think it is. I mean, it was almost a DSM-4 diagnosis.
Like self-sabotage?
Self-sabotage.
Interesting.
Some people are just attached to the old ways of doing it.
Right, they just are stuck where they're at.
We've always done it this way.
But don't you know people who they're living a certain way, and you're thinking to yourself, God, they have so much potential. They've got the opportunities right in front of them, and they're not taking it repeatedly. And it's so weird.
Someone we're coaching, I want her to apply for jobs that are really above her level.
Right.
So that she gets the best job she's underqualified for.
Right. And she's terrified of being rejected.
But we just went, so if 20 people say no and only one person says yes, you can only work at one job at a time.
Right. I like what you told her, though. What you actually said was, if you're not getting rejected, you are not reaching high enough. And I'm like, oh, I like that. That's really good.
That's how I got you.
That was really smooth. That was smooth.
It takes work to break out of your comfort zone, and many people don't have the health, the time, the energy to do it, especially if they're anxious, uncertain, or depressed.
So one thing I think you can do to help flip that, because whenever people say to me, I don't have time to do this, or I don't have time to do that, we are some of the busiest people we know. For me, after being as sick as I've been, is I don't have time not to. You need to flip that in your head a little bit. Tweak the saying and say it enough. You don't have time not to if you're a busy person.
There's social resistance to change. Groups hate change. Groups resist.
Oh my gosh, don't we know it?
Like
repeatedly, over and over. We work with these groups. They bring us in to do these things.
Just our family.
Oh.
Just our own family that, as we live super healthy lives, they make fun of you, they belittle you, and then when they get sick, they need you.
Right. But big groups are really hard.
But they're really hard. Families, coworkers, friends resist change. You spend time with people who have bad habits.
People are contagious.
So there's 3 ways people change. We're talking about change. They get an epiphany. So the imaging work we do is an epiphany for a lot of people. they realize they can change
Right.
their brain and change their life. When I saw my scan for the first time, I'm like, well, that's not as good as I want it to be.
Right.
How can I make it better? It was
me
an
too.
epiphany.
Yeah.
When I read this first study from Cyrus, as your weight goes up, the size and function of your brain goes down. That was an epiphany. I lost 25 pounds.
Right.
I was like, no, we're not doing, being fat and having a small brain. It's the wrong combination. Some people change by changing their friends.
Mm-hmm.
The fastest way to get healthy is find the healthiest person you can stand, and then spend as much time around him.
Because people are definitely contagious. Right.
And the other way people change is they make small incremental changes. And if you make one small change, you're more likely to make two. And if you make two small changes, you're more likely to make
steps.
four. So like in the 26-week course we taught, the Brain Warriors
like
Way,
people
got great results, but it was 1 week after the other, putting small habits into your life.
Yeah. And so this idea of people being contagious. So we have a lot of people who start to get healthy, and the first thing they run into is that resistance with coworkers, the resistance with family, and it trips them up. And a lot of people do give up, or they give up and then they keep trying to start over because it's hard. It's hard when you're first doing it to stand up to people. So I just have one thing to say. That is the one place where being a little oppositional and liking the word no comes in handy. So, be that person, think of yourself as that person who's the change maker. You are the change maker. It's okay to say no.
Well, it's what Gandhi said, right?
Right.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
And be the change maker.
And there's a spiritual resistance to change. You believe your reason for living will be disrupted if you change. So where are ruts in your life? Here are some questions. Do you dislike change? Do you tend to get stuck in loops of thinking? Do you struggle with repetitive negative thoughts? Do you have difficulty seeing options? Do you tend to hold your own opinion and not listen to others? Do you tend to be oppositional or argumentative? The more questions of these you answer yes to, the more likely your Cingulate works too hard, based on our research here at Amen Clinics. But what habits do you want to change, from a practical standpoint? Are there relationships, health, work, money? Do you have habits around these things you want to change? Cell phone, digital habits, email, brushing your teeth, making coffee, breakfast. What are the habits that are messing with your life? And quickly, we'll do more on this coming up, on 9 ways to embrace change and turn your ruts into the superhighways of success. So quickly, you got to boost serotonin. How do you boost serotonin?
Well, either the right carbohydrates, exercise, meditation, all those things boost.
Sunlight.
Oh, and serotonin?
Serotonin.
Okay, I just learned something.
Sunlight.
I had no idea.
It's intimately connected with vitamin D and mood and serotonin.
What do you know? I actually just learned something.
Bright light therapy. So say you live in Seattle and you're coming to wintertime. Is that one of the reasons
it works? I thought it was just vitamin D. I didn't know it was serotonin.
Vitamin D helps to optimize serotonin.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that's what it was connected to.
And brand new study just out today on Inuit tribes in Canada. It was actually a fairly large study. They looked at the psychological stress index, and the Inuits who had the highest level of psychological stress, more likely to be female. And we know females have 52% less serotonin. They had lower omega-3 fatty acid levels.
How is that?
And lower vitamin D levels.
Because they're not making fish their primary, right, to the Western diet.
Their diet has changed to the Western diet. Okay, so number 1 is boost serotonin. Number 2 is define the behavior we want to change. 3 is assess your readiness for change. So do you want to change? Are you thinking about it? Are you all in? You really have to go,
and don't lie to yourself.
Where am I? Identify your most vulnerable moments.
See, I think this is a really important one, to actually just take a minute to be aware that your vulnerable moments are when you have a meeting and your boss yells at you, and it happens every Friday, or when you pick your kids up and you take them over to some play date, or whatever it is, you go to your family's house for dinner, whatever it is, just knowing it. For some people, it's come down to when they eat in front of the TV in a certain room in the house. Just being aware of that means you can change it.
And then know the behaviors you need to do. So if you want to lose weight, it's eating right and exercising. It's more than that. But it's like whenever you come to a decision about food, you ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it? And if you love yourself, you make more good decisions. And this was really interesting, you develop if-then plans to overcome the vulnerable moments. And this has been shown in research study after research study to be effective. So if my mom offers me the second piece of pie, what am I going to do?
Right.
So it's really activating your frontal lobes that we talked about last time. It's activating the CEO to plan ahead of time. If this happens, then
So it's really a visualization exercise. You're visualizing what you want to have happen.
And then reframe your pain.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we do this all the time with people. Yep. It's, well, I don't want to deprive myself.
Right. But is that depriving you? Because engaging in that behavior is the deprivation.
What are we really going to deprive them of if they get
diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancer? Yeah. So
brain fog.
Exactly.
Very important to turn accomplices into friends or get rid of the enemy. I bet you become like the people you hang out with.
Or you've got to be really strong and be that change maker, because eventually you will begin to create your own community. Eventually they will begin to turn, but you've got to be strong.
Who came up to us at church?
Oh, it was hilarious.
And she came up to us.
She lost 26 pounds and she's like, oh, but that's not the thing. That's not the thing. And then she started to talk about her husband.
Who wouldn't do it.
Right. He was like irritated with her. Annoyed, irritated, didn't like that she was doing this because it means she's not going to cook the same way. She's not going to eat the same way when they go out. So he was like very resistant, right?
Until he saw her get super cute.
Right. And he still didn't change though. And remember, she said something to him. Remember what she said? It was really funny.
Really happy long after you're dead.
I don't think she said it quite like that, but yes.
That's what she said.
I love you, but I'm going to be, I'm going to be around and healthy and happy.
No, I think
when you leave me.
She was clear. I'm going to be really happy long after you're dead.
I don't think she meant she was going to be happy he was going to be dead.
No, she's just.
But that's how it
happy.
sounds, right?
That if he's not going to take care of him.
I'm going to choose happiness and health, right? Right.
And then you want to create a series of small wins to attain big gains. Mm-hmm. So those are the tiny habits that we often talk about in Brain Fit Life, our online community. So boost serotonin, know what you want, know the behaviors you need to do, and then come up with these if-then statements. So if I'm going to biting my fingernails, so if I get anxious, then I'm going to go drink a glass of water. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go listen to Coldplay, whatever it is. Come up with another plan. Think about it ahead of time, which actually engages your prefrontal cortex. Stay with us. We're going to talk about mastering your mind. Success starts here.
Welcome back. We are talking about success starts here. And today we are going to talk about mastering your mind. I think this is one of the most important things in any program, is mastering your mind.
No question about it. In the Western society, and this has been going on for thousands of years, we have a monkey mind. Right. Where our mind's like all over the place, jumping from branch to branch, completely undisciplined. And with an undisciplined mind comes anxiety, depression,
an undisciplined life.
And an undisciplined life.
And I always think of it like that inner child. Would you ever let your children behave a certain way? And if not, you got to rein that kid in, right?
So we're going to talk about how to feel happy and present while conquering worry and negativity. So there's some master your mind principles. 1, every time you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals.
And see, this was important for me to learn a long time ago.
Every single time you have a thought,
good
your
or bad,
brain releases chemicals. Your body reacts to every thought you have.
Yeah.
When you have a happy thought, a hopeful thought, your brain releases a set of chemicals that change the physiology in your body. So if I think of you, my heart rate goes slower, my hands get warmer, they get drier, my breathing becomes deeper.
Let's see, when you first met me, though, it was
heart
faster.
rate variability goes up. I mean, when I'm around you, I just feel
Settled.
happiness.
Yeah.
Right? If I think about someone that scares me,
right,
my hands get sweaty, they get colder, my muscles get tense, my breathing becomes disrupted, and heart rate variability goes down.
Right. So and this principle is so important. It's one of the reasons that I have these sort of rules. I like rules. I have these.
Seriously?
I really like rules.
What did we say about your Cingulate?
Yeah. Well, it's not that bad, but it's bad enough that I have rules.
You have rules.
I have rules. I definitely have rules. I think rules.
Now, I just said how much I love you. So
safe rules are safe. They're safe. So, but this idea that when I learned this idea that your brain releases chemicals, either good or bad, right? I try to wake up in the morning and like say a prayer and like focus on something really positive. I have these rules: no news in the morning, no news at night before bed, and no one's allowed to call me with their drama before I'm done with my morning with my daughter. Like I get her ready. We have a routine in the morning. So until that time is done, which is usually around 8 o'clock.
You left me out. Part of our routine is.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the morning routine with Chloe before school. So, and one of the reasons is I didn't want her growing up. No, that's not what I meant. But I don't want my daughter growing up, our daughter growing up with that same level of stress and chaos. So when I learned this, I'm like, my rule, no news in the morning, no news at night. And for her benefit, no calls with drama. Unless you're like dying and bleeding out, you cannot call me in the morning. So you can call me later. So, but that morning time needs to be a time of focusing on positive things.
So you're activating your frontal lobes to make a good decision.
Right.
I like that. Thoughts are powerful. Your thoughts are hardwired to be negative.
Isn't that interesting?
From an evolutionary standpoint, that's how we survive.
And I understand this. Even as a kid, forget evolution, as a kid who grew up in a chaotic environment, I notice what's wrong. And I notice it quick. You always get irritated because when we're walking, I'm always looking around, right? I'm always looking for that thing that's off. So I think if you grew up in a chaotic environment, it's an important thing to know. So it doesn't run your life, but to notice that you are hardwired. And those wires have been reinforced to notice what's wrong to keep you safe. Right.
The brain hates change. Thoughts are automatic. They just happen. I mean, you don't plan the thoughts that come into your head.
Right.
And they often lie to you. Mm-hmm. That they're just because you have a thought has nothing to do with whether or not it's true.
Yeah. It's like you'll hear some people say something, but I think, and they're convinced of something that's like kind of crazy. And so my new thing with working with family is, so what? Is it true? So what you're thinking that? Like, is that a true thought?
So you can learn to eliminate the ants, the automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that come into your mind automatically and ruin your day, that steal your happiness.
Right.
And so we have different ant species we have created. My new book, Captain Snout and the Superpower Questions, love that book. Talk about 7 different types, all or nothing ants. That's where things are all good or all bad. We have the best marriage ever in the history of the world.
Right.
And then when you're irritated at me, we have the worst marriage in the history.
No, he's not saying we do. No, clarify. We don't do that. You're just using that as an example.
As an example.
Right. He's making it sound like.
So the world is gray.
Right.
And many people really see it as black or white when it's just not accurate.
That's a hard one for
Just the bad ants. It's where you notice what's wrong. And you said that earlier in a prior lesson, that especially women are hard on themselves and they notice the negative about themselves or their spouse or their children, and it's generally not helpful.
Well, and one of the reasons women do tend to be more focused on and notice more what's wrong is from going back to what you said earlier. Hunter-gatherers, right? Women actually survived in communities together by paying attention, by warning each other, by, but let that run away and it's like a runaway train.
Guilt beatings, where you use words like should, must, ought, have to.
Yeah, you should all over yourself.
Did you really say that?
Yep.
Whoa. Labeling, where you label yourself or someone else with a negative term. He's a jerk. She's
Does that count
cold.
when you're in traffic?
Yes, it counts.
Just checking.
Yes, it counts. What an idiot. Because when you say that, you lump him or her with all of the idiots you've ever known, and you can't deal with the situation logically. Fortune teller ants. It's where you predict things are going to turn out badly, even though you don't have evidence of it. Mind reader ants, where you believe you know what somebody else is thinking, even though they haven't told you. I have 25 years of education, and I can't tell what anybody else is thinking.
Right.
A negative look from someone else may mean nothing more than they're constipated. You don't know. I have so many patients who go, oh, they're thinking this or they're thinking that. And I almost feel bad, like breaking it to them. And I teach them the 18-40-60 rule, which says when you're 18, you worry about what everybody's thinking of you. And when you're 40, you don't give a damn what anybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, you realize no one has been thinking about you at all.
I actually love that rule.
People spend their days worrying and thinking about themselves, not you.
Right.
And then the blaming ants, which are you're blaming other people for how your life is turning out.
And that actually, I think, disempowers you more than almost anything.
It's the red ant.
Right.
It's the worst ant, because whenever you blame someone for how your life is turning out, you become a victim and you can't change anything.
No, I really love this idea of responsibility does not mean blame, right? I learned this many years ago when I was feeling very sorry for myself and feeling like a victim. Someone very wise taught me this, and it's like responsibility and blame are not the same thing. Taking responsibility for your life, no matter what it is, whether it's you got cancer, whether it's someone close to you died and you are grief-stricken, it doesn't mean you're taking blame for the situation. It means that you have the ability to respond. That's what responsibility means. And I love that. As soon as I heard that, I went, whoa, okay, I don't want anyone else controlling and having the ability to respond and control my life. I want that ability, right? So I'm willing to take 100% responsibility. It's not my fault I got sick, but I'm still willing to take the responsibility for it. It changed the way I saw things completely.
So 5 daily thinking habits to build neural networks in your brain is you want to eliminate the ants as they attack. So whenever you feel sad, mad, nervous, or out of control, write down what you're thinking and then challenge it. Is it true? Can you absolutely know that's true? Stop the monkey mind. And how you stop the monkey mind is you just start paying attention. It's like, wow, my mind's all over the place. Is that helping me?
And you can do little grounding meditations, like 5-minute grounding techniques will just, it just
actually,
changes
for this
everything.
Day and age, you got to do it for 2 minutes because people have such a short attention
That's hilarious.
span, right? So I'm like, just take 10 deep breaths. 5 seconds in, hold it for a second or two, 5 seconds.
Do you recommend
out,
saying a mantra? Like I like
saying
saying a mantra while I do it. No?
What's your mantra?
Well, I have several.
Do
but
you want to share?
Well, one of them is I'm a living example of health and fitness. Now, I actually came up with that when I was sick. And it was because I wanted, as you stated earlier, reach above where you're at. Because I figured if I kept telling myself that would make me behave a certain way, right? And so now look where I'm at. But that's really cool. And then
I am a living example of health and fitness.
Mm-hmm. And so that way, when I don't feel good is when I actually say it the most. And another one is, it's just something I sort of like from karate. It's just wisdom, focus, energy. Before I go into a meeting or something, I sort of go through this thing and I take the deep breaths, and it's just wisdom, focus, energy. Just sort of like to get me grounded. I'll say a 2-minute prayer and then I'm good.
Love that. We want you to have appropriate anxiety. Mastering your mind is not about losing anxiety. You have to have enough that when you see the cheesecake, you really do see it as a weapon of mass destruction, because it is. And every day, start the day with today is going to be a great day. I love that one. Because when you do that, your brain will find the reasons why it's going to be a great day. If you wake up and you go, today is going to be a bad day, your brain will find why it's going to be a bad day. Discipline your mind. And every day take a daily dose of gratitude and appreciation, because they're like medicine for your soul.
For sure.
I have this cool little graph. Maybe you can help me go over it.
Sure.
It's on the benefits of gratitude. So I'll do personality, you do health. So for personality, you're less materialistic when you're grateful, less self-centered,
Isn't that
more
true?
Optimistic, increased self-esteem, and more spiritual.
So true. For health, you have improved sleep, you're less sick, you live longer, so your longevity is affected, increased energy, and more exercise. You tend to exercise more.
Emotionally, you have more good feelings, you're more relaxed, more resilient, less envious, happier memories.
And for career, better management, improved networking, interesting, goal achievement, improved decision-making, and increased productivity.
And socially, you're more social. You have a healthier marriage, kinder, more friendships, deeper relationships.
And this is just by focusing
we've been married
on gratitude.
Nearly 10 years. And, whenever you're with somebody for a long enough time, you could have your, I call them bucket of smelly fish, all the things that really upset you. And so how would your marriage be if you got the bucket of smelly fish and when you woke up in the morning, just took a big whiff?
But I know people who do that. I have friends who do that. And I just, you're not a good friend to somebody if you just let them do that. So when I have friends who do that, they wake up and all they do when you get together with them, if you go to lunch or whatever, is they've got to do this, beating up their spouse thing. And what a lot of women do is they're like, oh yeah, that jerk. And they just jump in. You're not being a good friend if you do that. You need to help that person get out of that place and not just sit there and don't do the whole, let's beat up on our spouses thing. It's not a good habit at all.
Getting rid of the bucket of smelly fish. So important. So you're kinder, you have more friendships, you have deeper relationships. Success starts here. Master your mind. Welcome back. Success starts here. And it's clearly involved your brain.
In everything you do.
Especially your relationships.
For sure.
And so this lesson is called Connect. How can you use your brain to improve your relationships? And one of the most interesting things I learned from the imaging work is that when a person's brain is better, they actually become more thoughtful. They become more loving.
I think that's true.
They become better connected. And so many years ago, I had a patient from Sacramento named Red. And he came to see me after he tried to kill himself.
Aww.
And he tried to kill himself by, turning on his car in his garage with all the, the door and windows closed because his wife left him. And she left him, he said, because he was the anger broker of the Sacramento Valley. And when he first came to see me, he was sort of an ass. I mean, I know you're not supposed to say that, but he was rude to my staff.
Right.
I was 10 minutes late. I'm the most on-time doctor you'll ever meet. And he starts chewing me out right away. at the end of the first session, I said, look, I'm going to send you for a scan because I need to get you better quickly, because I am not going to treat you if you don't treat me with respect.
Right.
And so I sent him over to the imaging center, and then he called me from the imaging center complaining about the technologist.
Oh my gosh.
He was just so awful. But his brain came back and it was damaged on the left
From the
side.
carbon monoxide?
No.
Oh.
He was an ass. That's why his wife was leaving him.
I see.
'cause
But
he
that
was an
didn't
ass.
help. That couldn't have helped.
It didn't help. But I'm like, did you ever have a head injury? He said, no. And I said, well, are you sure?
I know this whole routine. You asked him like 9 times.
I did. And he had a bad bike accident going down a Colorado mountain. And he had the cingulate from hell. So he had damage to his left frontal lobe.
Yeah.
That's the happy side of your brain. Happiness lives in the left front part of your brain.
So if you kill that.
And hurt his left temporal lobe, so short temper, mood instability, irritability, dark thoughts. And he had the cingulate from hell.
Could never let it go.
Just couldn't let it go. And so I gave him some medicine to stabilize his temporal lobes, to calm down his cingulate. And no lie, 3 weeks later, he's bringing flowers to the girls up front. He's so kind. I'm so sorry. I'm so grateful I have you. Please don't leave me. Everybody leaves me because I'm an ass. And he just, and I saw him for, I don't know, years. And he just became the most consistently loving person because his brain worked better.
That's amazing. No, but we see it all the time.
We see it all the time.
Right. We see it all the time.
Let's talk about some brain-based habits to elevate your relationship. So obviously it's taking care of and balancing your brain. So I came up with this little mnemonic, because I like those things, called relating. So R is for responsibility.
We just talked about that in the last lesson.
We did. And, people say, oh, it's 50-50. She's not doing her part, so I'm not going to do my part.
It's 100-100.
You have to do your whole thing.
Right.
And what I found, so it used to be, so the common lore is it takes 2 to make a relationship. And so, I was always thinking if I couldn't get the other person in and we work as a couple, that I would have no success with people. And then I realized there's ways to say things, and there are ways to say things.
No doubt.
And so as I empowered one person to be more focused, kinder, more purposeful, their partner became more focused, kinder, and purposeful. So I do this exercise with them, and I love doing this. So, so say it's a couple that's having problems, or I recently had a 13-year-old boy who was having problems with his dad. And I went, so how do you make your dad mad? He's like, what do you mean? I said, I know you know how to make him crazy. How do you make your dad yell at you? And he said, well, I won't talk to him when he comes in, or I'll be disrespectful to him, or I'll purposefully make noises when he wants us to be quiet.
It's amazing, right? Kids actually do this. They think it out.
I know exactly how to make you crazy.
You do.
Right?
You do. You don't. Thank God you
but
don't
I don't.
do it.
But I know it. And the reason I want you to ask yourself this question, so think of the relationship you want better. How do you make it worse? Because now we're talking about responsibility. Is you're a powerful person. And if you can make it worse, how do you make it better?
Right.
What are the things? Because I know exactly what would trigger your button.
You could walk in and tell me, shut the hell up and do what you're told.
It's like, take that dress off. But I don't do that.
No, thank God. I would not
because,
respond well.
And the reason I don't do that, besides I love you, is I will never get what I want, which
you will
is
get
a
lots of what you
kind,
don't want.
caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship.
Right.
And so I am using my frontal lobes, empathy, purpose, goal-directed.
So you can see, though, where this would be a problem. So you've got someone like me who has the cingulate, who can react when, to somebody who's aggressive. And then you've got somebody who's had a head injury. You see the problem there. someone who has low frontal lobe and maybe also has had their left temporal lobe damaged. And now all of a sudden that person's sort of mean, angry, comes in and just says whatever, says some mean things. And you put someone with someone like me.
And then they can't let it go.
Right. And I'm not the kind of person who will back down.
And domestic violence actually happens when you have one or both brains that aren't working.
Isn't that crazy? It's like, but you start to understand
that we have learned. So R is for responsibility. What is it I can do today to make this better? And get rid of blame, because it's just not helpful. E is for empathy, which is a frontal lobe function. It's beginning to see things from their point of view. Mm-hmm. L is for listening. So important. And we so suck at it as a society, right? People are talking over each other. And I love active listening. So, this family member of ours that we're coaching, and she's like, my daughter won't talk to me. And I'm like, well, it's because you talk over her and you don't listen. And, well, she won't talk to me. I said, I took her for a walk couple of days ago, and she's just like a little chatterbox.
Well, and it takes practice, because when I first learned this, you really helped me with this with our daughter. When you first learn, as moms, we think our role is to just tell our kids what to do and to do it right, like give them the instructions,
all the wisdom.
Right? Give them the wisdom, as opposed to listening to what they have to say and then asking questions
and letting them solve it themselves, because then they develop a sense of competence.
But it takes practice.
So active listening is whenever someone says something, repeat back the last 4 or 5 words you hear and listen for the feelings of it, and then repeat back what you hear. And then shut up.
Right.
If you shut up.
Yeah, it's the hard part.
And then they will continue to talk. And then you can listen. And listening is involved with bonding.
Yeah.
And if you talk over them and you don't listen, they will stop talking.
Well, now, it's, like I said, it takes practice, but now it's so much fun, because I'll start that process. I'll take my daughter for a drive. For some reason, when we're driving is when she just opens up, and it's amazing. So, but I'll ask a question, and she'll just go on and on and on. And then she'll sort of stop. And so I'll ask her another question, and then she'll just go on and on and on. But you learn so much about your kids.
So that's very interesting, because as a child psychiatrist, what we learned was to play games with kids. Because if you just had them sit on the couch and say, okay, tell me your pain, they won't talk to you.
They don't even really know how to.
But if you start playing cards with them, they will begin to open up and share what's on their mind. So a lot of parents go, I'm not paying $400 for you to play with the child. But that's not actually
It's
what
why
we're doing.
Therapy works too. Yeah.
The A in relating is for appropriate assertiveness. So this is really important. I had to teach this to so many patients over the years. If you don't ask for what you need in an appropriate way, you will never get it, because your husband or your wife is no good at reading your mind.
And women are notorious for this.
And their level of anxiety really gets in the way.
Or they think, he should know. If he were really a good husband, he would know what I want and what I need.
Except husbands are not good at reading your mind. And you need to tell them more than once, because they have a short attention span.
That's hilarious.
T is for actual physical time. Relationships and bonding require that. So, you come home and you want sex, and you've not called, you've not talked to her, you've not taken her out.
Good luck with that.
You don't go for a walk. It's like, forget it. I is for inquiry. So that's correcting the automatic negative thoughts. Ants. So if you have ants and your spouse has ants, the ants mate with each other, and you end up with super negative ants. N is for noticing what you like more than what you don't like.
You're really good
that's
at
how
that.
you shape behavior. And G is for connecting in groups or social networks. So I wrote, you can help me with this, 10 ways to sabotage your relationship. So what is number 1?
Number 1 is a poor attitude. So you expect the conversation to go nowhere, and you don't try to direct it in a positive way. Negative assumptions about the other person feed into your poor attitude. And up front, you don't trust the other person, so you remain stiff and guarded when you're together.
Yeah. So you expect things are going to turn out badly.
They're going to turn out badly.
predicting
Right.
the worst, or you have unclear expectations and needs. Do you expect people to guess what you want and need, or do you communicate with them? You know, people are not mind readers, or they're not very effective at reading your mind.
Number 3 is not to reinforce if you're not reinforcing body language. So no reinforcing body language. Body language is very important. It sends both conscious and unconscious messages. Isn't it true that only it's less than 30% of communication is actually verbal?
Say.
Right.
Right. So you could be talking to me and I could be on my phone, rolling my eyes, grunting.
Right. And the being on social media thing is what makes me crazy, when people are not paying attention to you. So when you fail to make eye contact or acknowledge the other person with facial or body gestures, he or she begins to feel lost, alone, unenthusiastic about continuing the conversation. I mean, just think about when you're talking to someone and they're just sitting there looking at their email going, You're like, why am I even bothering?
Right.
So I noticed, this is really interesting, in martial arts, they teach little kids, they start them at really young. It's like you have to make eye contact, because kids today don't make eye contact like they used to, right?
Well, their heads are buried in their phones.
Right.
4, competing with distractions. So like what you just said, distractions frequently doom communication.
Number 5 is never asking for feedback on what you're saying. So you can't assume that you're sending clear messages to the other person and think that they're understanding it. In fact, what they understand might be completely different from what you're saying to them. So you need to actually make sure they're understanding it. And that's why one of the things you taught me about with the active listening is to also repeat back. So if, I think what I'm hearing you say is, or I've heard you say, and then repeat it back. It's really important.
6 is kitchen sinking. This occurs in arguments where people feel backed into a corner, so they bring up completely unrelated things from the past to protect themselves or to stir stuff up further. So you want to stay on track. What are we really discussing?
Right. 7 is what we talked about earlier, mind reading. So you arbitrarily predict what another person is thinking and then react on the imagined information. It might not even be true. So mind reading is often a projection of what you think as opposed to what's real. Even after couples have been married for 30 years, it's impossible to know what they are thinking.
Right.
You might be
sometimes
better
you'll
at it.
go, oh, you're thinking this. And I'm like, I'm not. And
Right.
I'm like, not lying to you. I wasn't thinking that. And we
Right.
know each other really well.
Right.
8 is having to be right. This destroys effective communication. When a person has to be right in a conversation, there is no communication.
I've actually seen that become
only
abusive.
debate.
I've actually seen that be abusive in relationships, where someone won't let something go. They're yelling at you. They're screaming at you because they won't quit until you agree with them, even if what they're saying is completely absurd.
That happens a lot.
It's horrible. That's abusive.
Yeah.
It
happens
and
a
I
lot.
see parents do it to kids, and it's terrible.
Sparring, using put down, sarcasm, or discounting the other's ideas erodes meaningful dialogue and sets up distance in the relationship.
And lack of monitoring and follow-up. So often it takes repeated efforts to get what you need. You can't just say, well, I told you that 3 years ago, and think that person's going to really understand. I mean, when you are trying to teach your children something, do you give up after one time if they don't get it right? Right? And I'm not saying that your spouse is like your child. I'm saying relationships take that constant attention. So it's very important not to give up. When you give up asking for what you need, you often silently resent, or sometimes not so silently, resent the other person. So, which subverts the whole relationship.
So better brain, better relationship, but it's still critical to put these habits in your everyday life. And the more connected you are, the longer you live. Stay with us. Success starts here. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.